Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's webinar. I wanted to greet everyone on this very hot summer day, but hopefully you're inside staying cool. And thanks for joining me with this topic, weight loss and emotional eating, how to break the cycle. So as always, we'll go through this presentation at the very end. I'll be open to your questions, but if you want any questions answered in the middle, feel free to simply hit that bottom left hand of your screen button with the Q&A, and I'll be happy to address those questions. So let's get started. And as I say every week, remember, it is the quality of your calories that matters. It's just something to always keep in mind. And even when we're emotionally eating, it's not always high quality we seek out. So I wanted to emphasize over and over again, we really do want to care about quality as often as possible. So what are we going to cover today? Well, hopefully we can come back with a better understanding of emotional versus physical hunger, as well as identifying triggers for emotional eating. I may even call it habitual eating at some points, and practical strategies to manage emotional eating. So hopefully we can overcome this to some degree. And also to remind everyone to cultivate some self-compassion while you're on the weight loss journey. So, what if you're taking a GLP-1 medication but still finding that you're getting cravings? You may be asking yourself, I thought this was going to be gone. And for many people, it is. These medications are known to suppress appetite, and people do report that they also have reduced cravings, but that doesn't mean it happens to everybody. And it still may happen for some people. In fact, there are some people where I believe it is almost out of habit. Turning toward food for so long has just become a more habitual thing. And so even though maybe the cravings aren't as strong, they still exist. And so addressing the emotional aspect of eating can help build long-term success. So hopefully we can find some ways to do that. And let's quickly define what is emotional eating. You probably already know, but just in case, this is defined in various ways, but one way is just the propensity to eat in response to emotions and not eating in response to actual physical hunger. And some people may also call it I'm stress eating. And in some ways, it is a version of mindless eating, where it's not to nourish ourselves, it is in response to a way we may be feeling. And so some commonly associated emotions that you may connect to eating with these choices are stress, of course, sadness, boredom, I would say we could classify that as an emotion, as well as anxiety, loneliness, and even joy, or I should say, but also joy. We can imagine times where we're feeling celebratory and our thoughts are, I'm going to bake cookies for everyone. I'm so happy. Or we're at a wedding and enjoying cake. Oftentimes, I don't find myself just sitting down to eat cake, but at a wedding, I look forward to the wedding cake oftentimes. So there's also that type of emotional eating that exists too. So what are some of the key differences between physical and emotional hunger? I wanted to put this comparison, and I tried to align it with, physical is this, whereas emotional is that, so we can see some of the differences. For example, physical hunger, usually your stomach is growling, maybe it even hurts a little bit, and you're thinking, I need to eat now. Whereas emotional eating, maybe you feel hungry, but it's more of a butterflies or anxious type of feeling, not that really loud growling. Also, physical hunger may start out as a small pang and then grows over time. So you could think about maybe if you were heading out to lunch at a restaurant and the wait time ended up being an hour or something to that effect. And by the time the hour was up, you couldn't wait to sit down and start eating if at all possible, because you were just so hungry at that point. Whereas emotional oftentimes is a quick onset where you're doing your thing and then I want to eat this, maybe coming into mind, or a craving then pops up. So emotional eating is more of a quick onset at that point. Physical hunger, and I think this is what's really important, is if you are truly physically hungry, you may have the thought in your head of, I don't care what it is, I will eat anything, please bring me anything you have. I know that we all have foods that we might be picky about, but in general, we become a little less selective if we're physically hungry versus with emotional eating, we generally have a very, very specific food in mind, and it may be going toward the sweet dessert type foods or the savory chips and snack type foods. So the emotional eating is usually going after something that we find pretty texturally and taste-wise pleasing. Also with physical hunger, you may have some difficulty concentrating, or as people like to talk about, feeling hangry, or essentially a bit emotional in some ways, being a little bit angry and really needing to eat, where your personality almost changes. I think Snickers had a campaign on that saying, "You're not you when you're hungry." Whereas with emotional eating, you're not necessarily hangry per se, but you are seeking out something to address the way you're feeling. Also, with physical hunger, there are usually hours between being hungry, whereas with emotional, you could have just eaten lunch and now you have gone home and it's already time for a snack, even though we're less than 30 minutes post-eating. Also, with physical hunger and emotional hunger, these can sometimes be a little bit interchanged, because with hunger, yes, you may stop when full, although some of us do go past that. But emotional eating can frequently turn into eating in excess. So those are some key differences. And then again, as I wanted to mention, emotional eating may also be habitual. So this is where I might refer to it more as a mindless eating. But if you think to yourself, or if you look back and you always addressed boredom with eating, or say you thought as you grew up, every day at 2 p.m. we had coffee and cake or something like that, where it's always been this way, therefore you're used to that, and we sort of expect that or look forward to that. So just be aware that sometimes it is out of habit. The cycle of emotional eating, there are various versions of this, but it goes in sort of this circular manner where you feel an emotion or something triggers you. Then it leads to, I want to eat, and it's usually saying to yourself, I'm craving this, I want to eat that. And then we eat that food, and we do feel better to a degree, temporarily satisfied, it's gotten our mind off of whatever. But then many times we fall into this other situation right afterwards of guilt and saying to ourselves, why? Why did I eat that? I didn't need it, I wasn't actually hungry, I ate it, now I feel bad. And that's not healthy for ourselves, because that can sometimes lead to a bad self-image. And also it can start the cycle over again in a way, because we're feeling guilty and bad. That can be what triggers us to start that over again. To talk more about some triggers, they can be an internal trigger or external. Sometimes they go together. So some internal trigger examples are the ones I think we're most familiar with, where we're feeling stress or we're fatigued. Maybe we're doing that self-criticism, the why did I eat that? Or feeling bored, which was very common for myself. Even growing up, I remember thinking, I'm bored, let's eat something. Anxiety can bring it on for some people, but also excitement and joy. Then there are also external triggers, which I think oftentimes will happen along with emotions. Time of day, that's a little different in that I think that comes sometimes from habit. Again, if it is always eat at 12, we're always eating at noon, then if we didn't, even if we weren't hungry, we might still eat at noon. So be aware of that. And then social situations. So say we're on a date, or if we're at a birthday party, there is generally food involved. There may be more food involved than what we would have on our own. So be aware of that. And then certain environments. Maybe there's a place that triggers a certain memory, or there are smells and it reminds you of a time that you enjoyed or didn't. And so that can sometimes also trigger the response to eat, even if we're not hungry. So I do want to touch on, and this is part of the self-compassion, emotional eating is common. It can happen to, I don't want to say everybody, but it happens to many, many people. And just remind yourself you haven't failed because you're human, and it is something that many of us have done, and food has been and is used as a coping tool. And it's done so for years. I think all of us can think of the sort of trope, almost cliche, oh, you're going through a breakup, here's a pint of ice cream, or we're sad about something, here's again a pint of ice cream. I can picture in my head those scenes of people sitting down on a couch sad eating ice cream, and we all just say yes, that makes sense. And I attempted to find a an advertisement that touched on the ice cream trope, but I did find this, and actually these were some campaigns, I believe back near the 60s, 50s and 60s, where it was more talking about fatigue, but the sugar companies and Sugar Information Incorporated, you can see here on the ad on the left-hand side of your screen, where they were promoting sugar, saying it quenches your fatigue, it gives you the energy for the day. There was also an advertisement that promoted ice cream, saying eat ice cream before dinner so you don't overeat, which looking back, it's almost shocking that these types of advertisements existed, but they touch on, are you essentially fatigue? The solution is sugar. And so I didn't see any ads that specifically said, are you sad? The solution is sugar, but this is still a promotion of consuming sugary beverages, sugary foods to deal with what might be getting in your way or completing your day. So anyhow, rather than relying on willpower, let's look for some new tools, which we'll start addressing. So first of all, breaking the cycle. This is the cycle or maybe circle of mindful eating, where you don't necessarily have to go fully in a circle on these, but they're good questions to ask yourself about foods that you're about to eat, or maybe something just looking in your past of when you're eating. So one of the first questions is why? Why do I eat? So what is the trigger? Is it physical hunger that is normally why you're eating? Is it because you're in a challenging situation? Is it visual cues? Sort of finding yourself the why, or even if you're eating processed food all the time. Why is that? Is it because of the environment or you weren't prepared? If you're eating late at night, why is that? Is it because you're just up late and after a certain point we get a bit hungry? Or are we distracted? Try and find the why behind most of it. And also, when? So when do I want to eat? When do I find myself wanting to eat? Is it always because I'm feeling hungry? Or is it emotional cues or the clock? I even put, would you be eating if you weren't looking at the clock? If you didn't know it was noon, or if you didn't know it was 11:30, whenever the typical time to stop and eat, would you stop and eat? And if the answer is still yes, that's understandable. It is certainly fine to address physical hunger. The next is what, what am I choosing to eat? So are you eating it for flavor? Are you eating it because of it's convenient? Do you choose foods that are readily available? Or is it for nutrition? Are you fueling for an activity? There are a variety of types of foods, and looking to see what types you're picking more frequently than others can also sort of help guide you. A big one is this bottom one: how do I eat? Are we eating in the car all the time? Are you in a rush? Are you sitting at your computer? Do you eat in secret? Because some people have that associated shame with eating, which can bring forth a cycle of emotional eating. So what is the typical reason, or how are you normally consuming your meals? Also, are you consuming them when you're distracted? Are we watching a movie and just putting our hand in a bag and not really looking at the food we're eating? So there's a lot of ways to analyze that. Also, how much do you eat is a way that we can look and say, do we eat because we're feeling a certain level of full, or are we part of the clean plate club? So if you are somebody who cleans the plate all the time, no, because that's how you were raised, many people were, ask yourself, would I eat the same amount if I had it on a smaller plate? As in, would you have to go back for seconds, or would you complete the smaller plate and be done and satisfied? And and it doesn't mean where do you eat, but more where is the energy for the food that I'm eating going? So did I eat the food and then I immediately want to take a nap? So did I use that food for productivity in some ways? Or was it almost like an energy, mental energy? Did the energy toward the food that you ate just simply go toward guilt or bad feelings? And did you use the energy during work to help keep yourself focused? So again, a variety of questions that you can ask. And this can sometimes help us take a step back and look at what and when and why we're choosing the foods that we eat. Some other things about building your toolkit to address emotional eating, or just helping address how we eat throughout the day. One, and I know I've referenced this hunger scale a few times already in a few other weeks of my presentation, but if you have a chance, check your hunger on the hunger scale, both before and maybe midway through, and then after you eat. If we start out at a 2 or 3, hopefully not a 1, but somewhere between 1 and 3, and then we land somewhere between 4 to 6, I would say that's a good outcome. But of course, if we're sitting at a 5, if you can answer to yourself that you're sitting at a 5 and then are still choosing to eat after that, then maybe you're not truly hungry. And that might be more of an emotional approach. So try and check with yourself before sitting down and eating, or before continuing to eat. Also, while I'm not someone who says you have to food journal every day, sometimes, especially if you're concerned about emotional eating in particular, tracking your foods for a few days, you don't even have to worry about measuring things out, but track what you're eating, and also take a moment to maybe write on the side, what are your emotions, or what is your hunger on the hunger scale? Maybe you can see some associated triggers and see maybe there's a way to look back and step back and say, oh, I was feeling very stressed these couple of days, and I see that I was eating very unhealthily. What can I do to mitigate that? Or you can say, if I know that I'm going to be stressed on certain days because there are some things in work, I know some people who might be accountants and they get stressed around tax season. Can we be prepared for that? Can we have some foods that are more convenient? Maybe cut up fruit in the refrigerator or break room. That would be something easy and simple to grab, something appealing that might be more healthy than what we already have. Something else is thinking like a food critic is the way I talk about it. So again, you could be writing things down, but really try and think about the food you're eating. How would you describe it if you had to write for an article? What are the textures and flavors? How would you rate it? And even with the rating, so if you wouldn't give it 5 stars, do you want to waste your appetite on something that doesn't taste that great? So that might help as well. If you don't rate it high, don't waste your time or calories on it. You deserve the 5-star food. And as I sort of referenced earlier, create an environment with healthier choices. And so this is the time where when you're thinking actively about prevention, you want to make sure that you have the healthier foods available ahead of time. I know one person lamented if she bought strawberries from the store and had them in the refrigerator but didn't do anything with them, they would often rot. But if she washed them right away, sliced them up and put them in a bowl, then she said they would be gone within a day because of the family wanting to raid that. And the key there was convenience. The strawberries, the types, the availability didn't change, but it was now I don't have to wash it or slice it. And so then immediately her family members would go toward it. So if creating an environment where things that are more convenient and readily available is something that you can do or feel like you would help you, get started on it, strike while the iron is hot and while you're feeling not emotional, not habitual, and certainly don't go shopping while hungry at the grocery store. And again, you can always stop and ask yourself, what am I asking this food to do for me? Or where is the nutrition coming from? Are we using this food? Is it highly nutritious? Is it helpful? Is it going to help me reach my goals? And don't worry, there are times where we are eating food for comfort, but recognizing it can at least help you maybe slow down and not overeat. Maybe I'm having a Hershey's Kiss, it's going to make me feel better, but then I can stop because I know that if I continue, it will get worse. So these are a few tools that may help, and pick the one that most works for you in your life, because not all of these will work for everybody. So I invite you to muse on that and decide for yourself what's going to help me best. Also, I want to remind all of us to, manage our expectations and do please practice some self-compassion. Weight loss is not a linear journey. In fact, I will be touching on that a little bit next week because plateaus are common. So we can't expect to see a straight line, and we will have moments that we won't be acting perfect. Again, we are human. And so recognize the fact that emotional eating may still show up from time to time. It's just that it won't be hopefully as frequent. So you can accept that it might happen, but if our patterns for emotional eating are improving, then we can know that we're going to be successful in the long run. And just remember, if the emotional eating shows up, but you feel shame about the backsliding, be aware that that can start the cycle. So again, that's why I encourage self-compassion, because we don't want to feel that shame. It's not worth it because it can, again, restart the cycle where we are eating more than we mean to more frequently. And for setting goals, I wanted to mention this. If your ultimate goal seems monumental, then try and set yourself a minimal goal too. So, an example, because I talked about meal planning, I believe, last week. If you were going to say to yourself, I'm going to cook all of my meals for myself. So every single meal is going to be homemade. I'm going to bring leftovers. I'm going to have a dinner made for myself. I'm going to be awesome. If you set yourself up with that level, unless it's something that you think is easily doable for you, but if that is monumental for you, you're going to feel really discouraged if you don't achieve that within the first week. So maybe you're going to have to say, I can't cook for myself tonight. I'm too busy. It's too late. The food at the grocery store didn't look good. Maybe the produce didn't look as good as normal. I have to dine out. So then say, okay, rather than letting myself be disappointed, I will choose one of the healthy lunches or healthy dinners from the restaurant that I'm going to pick. So again, you didn't cook for yourself for every meal, or maybe you didn't bring leftovers for lunch. But if you know that you're going to be going to a restaurant for whatever reason, that's okay. You didn't break your entire goal. Be happy with the fact that you're still meeting the minimal. So having some levels to your goal setting can be helpful as well. So, to put it all together, remember emotional eating is common and can still happen if we are on these medications. It's not, again, for some people it seems less common, but it doesn't happen for everyone. So it can be managed. Also, understanding why it's happening, why we may emotionally eat, can help us to make those changes and overcome those specific whys. Also, try to learn to recognize hunger cues. Are they physical, emotional? Where are we on this? And we talked about having a toolkit, so try and find the tools that work for you. So whatever works best for you, that can help you choose healthier options and hopefully redirects away from eating emotionally, which are generally less healthy options. And with that, I now leave this open for any questions for a few minutes. Please feel free to hit the bottom left-hand button for Q&A at the bottom of your screen if you do have any questions. And if you wish to remain anonymous, that's perfectly fine. Or if you have your name, I will likely say it out loud. Also, if you think of a question later, by all means, feel free to reach out to the Premier Weight Loss staff. They can possibly answer your question themselves, or they can send your question to me and I'll be happy to address that. So I will wait here for just a few minutes. Okay, well, I don't see any questions popping up at the moment. Again, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to the Premier Weight Loss staff, and they will be happy to direct those to me. But I do thank you so much for your time and joining today. And as always, have a lovely rest of the day. Stay cool, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Bye.